At one point, he was the #1 ranked wide receiver in his class. He was a 5-star recruit, the future of Ohio State football, and the sky was the limit for him. Then things would go south. He'd have a family emergency, the details surrounding his transfer was one of the biggest controversies in college football, and he slowly started to go under the rug at his new school. As of 2021, he went undrafted this past May, and things are somewhat looking bleak for him. In today's video, we're going to talk about another football prodigy, his entire football career, and what would go wrong for him. Yesterday, I did a video on Dylan Moses, and over the next few days, I'm going to be taking a look at some recent players who went undrafted, who were big deals coming out of high school, and what they're up to now, so be sure to stay tuned. Now, let's get started. So now you may be wondering who we are going to be talking about in today's video, and it is none other than Trevon Grimes. But before we can talk about his downfall, we need to talk about his rise. Trevon grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, but moved to Florida when he was in 6th grade. He loved football from a young age and was obviously very talented at it. As a freshman, he got a ton of big-time offers, as schools such as Ohio State, Auburn, LSU, and Tennessee had offered him, and he was somewhat of a prodigy. He was a great player, and he modeled his game after one of the NFL's best wide receivers ever. Grimes said, quote, "Calvin Johnson is a guy I've always looked up to and admired. If I had to choose a receiver to be like, I'd pick Calvin. I have a nickname I call myself Tregatron." He had a lot of hype, and he took his talents to St. Thomas Aquinas High School in Florida, the same school that the Bosa brothers went to. He gained all that recruiting attention as a freshman, and he was basically going to be able to go wherever he wanted. Eventually, he would decide to take his talents to Ohio State, and committed to the Buckeyes over the likes of Alabama, Georgia, Florida State, Florida, and Miami. He joined another top 10 receiver in the class in Tyjon Lindsey, and Ohio State fans were very excited. Grimes had this to say about Ohio State: "One thing that I'm big on is feeling like I'm at home. At Ohio State, I feel like I'm at home. It would take a lot for another school to jump past that, but as of now, Ohio State is my leader, and I'm sticking with that." Grimes was an ultra-talented player, and he was the #1 wide receiver in his class at this point. He had gained 18.3 yards per reception, and was one of the most dominant wide receivers in the country. He also had incredible physical measures, as he ran a 4.47 40-yard dash time, had a 34-inch vertical, and a 4.01 second agility shuttle, which was the second best amongst receivers in the country. People were ultra high on him, and this is what scouts had to say. Quote, "He has a great work ethic in the weight room, he pushes himself hard and inspires his teammates. Obviously, he's physically gifted with a big, strong body and a substantial amount of speed. He has an ability to stretch the field and make explosive plays. From an intangible standpoint, he has strong character. He has a very positive attitude, he has a willpower and a drive that is uncanny." So yeah, at one point he was as high as the #1 receiver in the 2017 class, but he would drop a few spots after he would tear his ACL. The game that he got hurt in was actually against one of his future teammates, Tate Martell. Despite being that #1 player at one point, he was still a highly sought after and widely respected player, as according to 24/7 Sports, he was a 4-star recruit, the #6 wide receiver, and the 41st best player in the class of 2017. He came into Ohio State and was one of the young playmakers on the team, but he didn't play a whole lot. He would appear in 2 games for the Buckeyes, catching a total of 3 passes for 20 yards. Nothing too incredible, but something would happen in November. His season would end early, and he went back home down to Florida to be with his mom, who at the time was sick with cancer, and the coaching staff said he would return in the spring. Eventually, Grimes wanted to play college football closer to home, and he would enter the transfer portal and decide to go to Florida, where he'd be reunited with his former high school quarterback, Jake Allen. He said, quote, "It just felt like it fit for me. It's close to home, and of course, being in the situation that I'm in right now, I have to be close to home." Grimes would end up getting a hardship waiver, which was granted because of his family medical issue, and he would not have to sit out a year after transferring. Unfortunately, there would be a lot of controversy surrounding this. His estranged father by the name of LeBron Grimes said that his son did not transfer because of a medical issue with his mom, but in fact, transferred because wide receivers coach Zach Smith had a confrontation at practice and called him a racial slur. A big-time college football columnist exposed this to the world, and this lit up social media. Eventually, Trevon's mom would give out a statement and said, quote, "If my ex-husband is the person spreading these rumors, everyone should know that neither I nor Trevon have any contact with him whatsoever. He knows nothing about my health and nothing about Trevon's transfer to Florida. He is an abuser and the worst kind of role model, and he is no longer in Trevon's life." Apparently, one of his dad's friends can vouch that they both met up with Trevon after the incident, but it seems like it is false. Some of his teammates would come to his support, and guys like Johnny Dixon, Austin Mack, Tate Martell, and Paris Campbell all voiced their opinion on Twitter, saying it never happened. The former #1 wide receiver in his class could finally focus in close to home and try to save his football career. Going into his Florida career, he'd be stuck with a logjam of wide receivers that included Van Jefferson, Josh Hammond, Freddie Swain, Kadarius Toney, and Tyree Cleveland. At the time, Felipe Franks was the quarterback, and Dan Mullen was the head coach. He catch a touchdown and 3 passes in his first game, but during the regular season, he was not much of a factor. He'd finally have the best and the breakout game of his career as the Gators would go on the road to Florida State and he'd catch 5 passes for 118 yards and a score. They go to a bowl game, but he was a non-factor. Going into 2019, he was expected to play a larger role, and the Gators would open up the season week 0 against Miami in the Camping World kickoff game. That game was an absolute thriller, but Grimes did not have much of a factor in it. Flash forward to September 14th, Felipe Franks would get injured, and Kyle Trask would now become the starting quarterback. This still really wouldn't change his numbers, as his best game of the year would come in November against Vanderbilt, as he had 4 catches for 95 yards and a touchdown. He didn't seem to have the role that many expected him to have, and he would finish the 2019 season with 33 catches for 491 yards and 3 touchdowns. Going into 2020, Grimes was expected to take on a bigger role, but instead, Kyle Pitts and Kadarius Toney would become the 2 superstars. Grimes would make a role for himself and prove that he should be drafted into the NFL. He'd have a touchdown against Ole Miss, a touchdown against both Missouri and Georgia, and then he'd have the game of his career against Arkansas as he caught 6 passes for 109 yards and 2 touchdowns. He'd have another 2 touchdown performance on the road against Tennessee, would have 100 yards in their loss at home to LSU, and then in the SEC championship game, he'd catch 4 passes for 78 yards and a touchdown, which would be his final collegiate game. He would finish the 2020 campaign with 38 catches for 589 yards and 9 touchdowns. He had opted out of the bowl game, and he had caught exactly 100 receptions in his football career. From there, many assumed that Trevon Grimes would get drafted, but there were some red flags behind the scenes that no one was really talking about. Yes, he had a great 2020 campaign, had 9 touchdowns, played well against Pat Surtain and an elite Georgia defense, but according to a lot of NFL GMs and the research I've done, many teams thought he was more interested in partying than actually playing football. I found this on walterfootball.com, so if you don't believe me, I will leave the source. Despite going undrafted, he would go to one of the better organizations to be a wide receiver, and that was the Philadelphia Eagles. Besides Devontae Smith, Jalen Reagor, and Greg Ward, the Eagles really didn't have many options, and if Grimes was good enough, he was going to be able to fight for a roster spot. Unfortunately for Grimes, he had suffered a knee injury and actually underwent a knee procedure in early June, but the Eagles decided enough was enough, and they would waive Grimes as of a couple days ago with an injury settlement. So as of right now, not only is Grimes behind the 8 ball, but he's also an undrafted free agent, he's coming off an injury, and he's not even on a team. Things are not exactly looking great for Grimes right now, and we'll have to see if he bounces back or not. Many players are presented with these kind of circumstances in their careers, and they either fight through it or they give up. Grimes was a prodigy coming out of high school, a name that everyone was talking about, and he played for 2 premier programs, but we are going to see what he is made of and if he can live up to his height. It's a little too early to call Trevon Grimes a bust, but he did not exactly live up to the hype he had coming out of high school, as if you're a top 6 wide receiver in your class, you're expected to be a superstar and a likely 1st to 2nd round pick. It's unfortunate to see the circumstances that he is going through, but it is life and we will see how he handles it. What do you guys think though? What do you think of Trevon Grimes? Who's another player I could take a look at next? And please be sure to subscribe and hit that like button before you go. Check out all my other videos on the end screen, and I hope to see you guys again soon. But until next time, peace.